What was your screen time last week? If you're like me, you don't know because you're too afraid to look. And that's just me talking about my little screen, my phone. If I added up all the time on my phone, my laptop, and TV, well, let's just say it would be easier to count the time not on screens each week. It's embarrassing, but it's also the reality of the world we live in. You probably want to do better, to be healthy, to improve your finances. But you also live in a world full of distractions and things pulling at your time and your attention. So, how do you win? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton. I help high achievers who feel stuck bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Traditional self help doesn't work because it's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change by making it so easy it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I'll help you create habits, routines, and behaviors that stick so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. Uncle Ben Parker said, "With great power comes great responsibility." And in the 21st century, the most powerful force acting on our lives, whether we want to admit it or not, is technology. Smartphones, social media, scrolling, these things affect every aspect of your life. And the true effect and potential damage won't even be seen for generations to come. But that doesn't mean that you have to accept these things controlling you as fate. If you want to succeed in any area of your life, it's imperative that you take back control from the technologies that are trying to control you. And that's why I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation with Josh Czuba. Josh is a writer and content creator who's on a mission to humanize the internet. He channels his creativity into helping people navigate the mental health challenges of our modern consumption culture. Josh is a modern day philosopher. My words, not his. But if you check out his content or listen to this episode, you'll be inclined to agree. In this episode, Josh and I discuss the dangers of unintentional use of modern technologies, what a nourishing relationship with technology looks like, why addition-based strategies are more optimal for behavior change than subtraction, how to win in a system that's rigged for you to fail, as well as the dangers of toxic self-improvement. So phones down and listen up, take notes if you can, and enjoy this conversation with Josh Czuba. Why is it important for us to start focus on creating more than consuming?
Well, the way I think about this is our social media technology is not going anywhere. Our phones are not going anywhere. We were put in this information environment without being prepared for it. And so rather than throwing our phones in the ocean, rather than deleting social media en masse and just going back into the woods, I believe there's a more productive and a more fulfilling way to use it. If we could use the technology in a meaningful way, then we can move forward with the technology that's continuing to develop and evolve and get something out of it. While it can be a slippery slope, for sure, I have experienced a lot of benefits from living my life creatively and trying to use this in a meaningful way. I think it's very difficult. And like any technology, when you try to use it, it has other externalities. And when you try to use a complicated thing, infinite more questions present themselves. But in general, if we're going to have social media and if we're going to live as a digital society, we might as well use these tools as effectively, as meaningfully, as creatively as possible.
To your point, social media is here, it's not going anywhere. Where do you see the big negatives being? A lot of people talk about how social media is poisoning our brains and it's making kids into zombies and all these different things, and a lot of words like doom scrolling, and it can seem very doom and gloom, but surely social media does have positive benefits for us as well. Like you and I connected on social media, you're teaching hundreds of thousands of people on social media and helping them every day. So what are the real negative aspects that we need to try to protect ourselves from?
Yeah, there's a lot, right? I've learned a lot from the Center for Humane Technology, who has they have a really great breakdown of a lot of the harms of social media as it's designed right now. I think in general, the biggest blanket statement I can give is just unintentional use. This is something I've experienced in my own life, but the chronic consumption habits. When you find yourself on Instagram or TikTok or any type of quick hit, infinite content type app, and you're just consuming without a plan, without a purpose, accepting whatever the algorithm gives to you. I think that that's probably one of the most destructive uses we have in our current system, where you could just get a quick hit of dopamine that is optimized to grab your attention, right? The algorithm learns about your preferences and gives you what you want, what's going to keep you on the app longer so that they can make money off of your attention, right? So I think that's probably number one. Obviously, we see it in the social world and the comparison culture that kids and people who've grown up on social media are experiencing. That's something I've gone through as well. But the thing that I talk about the most is that chronic consumption, something very easy to fall into. Is it something that you experience at all?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%. When I talk about habits that I'm trying to break, I'm a pretty healthy
Okay.
person, so I my food is dialed in, my nutrition is dialed in, my exercise is dialed in. But the thing that I'm trying to break is my scrolling. Like that is the thing that I like. I remember when I first got when they first started doing screen time and it would tell you like how much you're looking at it. Like I wanted to throw my phone into the river, like you said, and it's definitely something that I struggle with. So I completely understand. So but with something as you said that is so ubiquitous, it is
Mm-hmm.
a part of our culture for better or for worse, right? We're 15 years into the social media age, and depending on where you started from, and it's only getting bigger, it's only continuing to grow. People now even TikTok things instead of Googling them. This is the way things are going. How do we start to disconnect ourselves from something that is so powerful and at times quite helpful? Hey, real quick, we'll be back to the show in just a few seconds, but right now I just have to tell you about my free weekly newsletter. If you want to join the thousands of change seekers just like you who get a curated list each week of 5 educational, informative, and inspiring pieces of content to help you on your quest for change, then click the link in the notes that says free newsletter right now. You'll get signed up for free tips that will make your change journey easier, sent straight to your inbox every Friday. All you have to do is click free newsletter in whatever app you're listening on. Okay, now back to the show.
Well, that's an interesting point there. Like, it can be helpful. This tech is really powerful, obviously. It has the power to control us, it has the power to take advantage of our most vulnerable sides of ourselves, our vulnerabilities, our primal instincts to consume and to seek pleasure and to seek escapism from the discomfort of modern life. I think about how can we use it to nourish ourselves, and maybe how do we not necessarily disconnect, but reconnect to something that is meaningful. I know I kind of touched on this before, but yeah, I think that in general, addition based strategies are more effective for change than subtraction. I talk about this a little bit in my videos, but in my personal experience, I've never made a sustainable positive change by focusing on what I need to remove and devoting all of my attention to the problem that needs to go away. How do I erase this from my life? How do I use abstinence to make myself feel better? I've received far more positivity and far more enjoyment from the process by giving my attention to something new. If I want to quit smoking, I don't want my attention to be on the absence of smoking and maintaining that absence, because then it's just a void, right? You feel the absence, and that's where your attention goes. If my attention instead goes into something creative, into something social, into something fun, into movement that's really fulfilling and allows me to experience the full capability of my body, those things are fun, or they're at least enriching. They are stimulating. And if we're creatures that are hardwired to seek stimulation, we just have to be a little bit intentional about where we get it. And so I think in the addition of new lifestyle practices, new hobbies, new things to do that are fun, that we can enjoy with other people, that's where our attention should go. I talk a lot about creativity as one of those things because I enjoy it. Something as simple as journaling, just taking your attention, devoting it to the world around you, and then translating that onto a piece of paper or into something creative. I think those are the most immediate interventions that are accessible to you and are enjoyable, so that you don't have to operate from a place of shame or guilt. You can do what's fun and have it naturally replace the thing that is ultimately taxing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I phrase it as I've never seen someone achieve success by running away from something,
Mm,
only by running towards it. Whereas, again, I use weight loss and fitness as an analogy because that's the world I came from. I was a personal trainer for a long time. And I always say, like, people try to hate themselves skinny, but that always comes back around. Those are the people who diet, they lose weight, they fall off, they go back to what they were doing. Whereas when you're trying to be healthy for your own betterment, or trying to just go out and get more steps because you want to be out in nature, somehow you get the goal, which is losing the weight on the back end. But very rarely do people just from a negative space, as you said, subtraction, find, because it makes that void. And Dr. Benjamin Hardy talks about this in a book called The Gap and the Gain. When you're looking at what you lack, it presents a gap in where you are versus where you want to be. And versus when you look at what you've gained, it shows progress, and it actually motivates us to move forward. But as you were talking there, you use the word nourish, which to me juxtaposes nicely with
Mm.
consume. So I'm curious how you see something as being nourishing versus something being blind consumption.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that's the most important distinction, right? If we're going to use the social media and flow with the technology, we have to have some protocol, some framework for how to do that. I think that the nutrition analogy is really helpful. It kind of clicks with people. It clicks with me, at least. If you think about your media diet, the information you're taking in, when you're consuming without a purpose, without intentionality, without anything of real depth, that's the equivalent of like fast food, fast, quick hit media that gives you an immediate rush, but doesn't give you something deeper or encourage you to really think about something, or it doesn't require much challenge intellectually. I think the other side of that, more intentional consumption, is something that fuels you and connects you with something that is bigger than instant gratification. So in how to distinguish between the two, I always start with intentionality. If you ask people like what they actually want to be doing and what they actually want to be watching, if you were to really go through an in-depth investigative process there, I think that very few people would genuinely want to be, I want to just randomly scroll and be hit with the thing that is the next thing. It seems like that's always a distraction from the greater purpose. And while some people don't feel like they know what they'd rather be doing, they just haven't found it yet. There's no one who really, I believe, actually wants to continuously distract themselves and live in a lifestyle of chronic consumption. So the question is, okay, how do I find something that's more interesting? Well, you have to consciously and intentionally expose yourself to new things. I think I might be getting away from the point here, but in general, the nourishing content, the nourishing information, I would think fuels the other areas of your life that are meaningful. So it's something that fuels the creative work. You read about what you want to write about. You just gave a great example with the gap and the gain, right? That fuels you in your coaching endeavors and the things that you're interested in. Like that's great intentional consumption. It doesn't have to be in the self-improvement space. I would say for a lot of people, it shouldn't be. I think that like fiction is a great choice of that. It can even be internet content, it can be from the creators you like. But that intentionality component of being able to say, I'm watching or listening to this thing because of this reason. I want this thing from it. I like this person's personality. I want to mimic it in my own work. I want to learn from them. And like that intentionality changes the way that you consume right away. And it's fundamentally different than just randomly, chronically consuming whatever it is your algorithm gives to you randomly.
Yeah, it's so powerful, intentionality, that word. And to just highlight how powerful this stuff is, literally today I have every day a goal of to get my tasks done before I open social
Oh,
media,
cool.
period.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I know that once I open it, like I have very little self-control over it. So I used to go like, I'll just do it for, I'll post my stories, but it's like, no, I have to get certain things done before I'll even allow myself to open it. But today, because we had this podcast coming up, I was like, oh, I have to go DM Josh. So let me just open it real
Yeah, yeah.
quick just to DM Josh. And then I did. I sent you a message, and then I found myself scrolling like 3 minutes later, and I was just like, wait, hold on now. Like I had to like take my phone and like literally put it on the other side of the room. But that's the type of stuff that we're up against. And this is tech companies have billions of dollars of research going into how to make it do that and how to trick your brain into doing that. And they hired the top scientists out of MIT and Stanford and Harvard, and none of this is by accident. So how do you see us, you, me, the individual, the person listening to this, being able to fight back against what is essentially the conglomerate of the 21st century trying to steal our attention from us?
Yeah. It's a tough one, man. It's a big, big question that we're all going to have to figure out over the course of next years of our life. I think that while we have to recognize the power of individual control, like, ultimately you're the only one who can make any kind of change in your life. You are driving your conscious experience, you're behind the wheel, and the acceptance of that control is what empowers you to do anything. It is a collective thing. And on some level, we're going to have to come together and do in some way what we're doing now, but in a larger group, talk about how this has affected us, share our experiences, make the positive changes, introducing the new lifestyle practices, the systems, the creativity, the connection, the movement, doing those things together. I personally believe in the practices and the systems and doing them together over more high-tech solutions. I'm starting to explore some of those as well. Like I've been talking with, like tech founders who are building tools to change social media, and that's a huge part of it. I think more realistically, I see it as a top-down and a bottom-up solution. So obviously we can recognize that the social media ecosystem was specifically designed to take advantage of us and to reduce us to advertising dollars and to addict us ultimately so that our attention can be turned into money for them. So that requires a top-down solution. You have to rebuild the technology. You have to systematically redesign social media so that it doesn't have features that take advantage of us, like infinite scroll, like notifications that buzz and activate the urgency response in our brain, that show up red on our home screen so that we are primally motivated to click on the notification, so that when you go to send a message to someone who you want to have a connection with, you don't get sucked into something you don't want to be doing. Even though you've already put in so much effort to be disciplined and have control over your life, you're still susceptible to it because you're a human being. Until all of those things are redesigned, rethought, and restructured so that social media is net positive for our psychology, we're still going to have the problem. But my whole thing is that has never felt very accessible to me on the day to day. And so I'm more interested personally in the bottom up solution, which is what I have control over, what you have control over, the actions, the systems that you can implement for yourself, so that even if the technology never changes, you can feel like you have autonomy in your life. And that's where I'm trying to bring people together and sort of go through this together, introduce new systems, the practices that we've talked about to have control over your life. But it's going to be complicated and it's going to take some effort. And you said the words fight back. In some ways, it does very much feel like a revolution of attention, or Johan Hari calls it attention rebellion. Um, I think it should be taken seriously, but I do always go back to the fact that this really only works if it's enjoyable. So while
Mm-hmm.
you should recognize the seriousness and it will be difficult, the sustainable pathway out is going to be fun. It's going to be exciting, enriching. You're going to feel the electricity of it. And that's what I remind myself, especially on days where it feels very difficult.
A lot of points that I want to kind of follow those
Yeah,
threads
for
for a
sure.
second. But it's what I really liked it, both the top up and the bottom down. I mean, top down and bottom up that we're looking at, right? It's not either or; it's both and. That's usually the way that we have to look at these things. But it's interesting as you're talking about social media and what we're fighting against. To me, I'm also thinking that sounds exactly like what we're up against with big
Mm,
alcohol and big food and all of these things that are set up to set made for us to fail, to take advantage of our lower instincts as humans. Like alcohol has been promoted as this thing that's like it's just normal and you just do it and you're weird if you don't do it and everyone should be out drinking on a Friday night. And it's like now we're realizing it's like, oh no, this is poison that's killing us.
mm,
And processed foods that have just been pumped into for forever, and all of these different pieces that are all kind of the same. It's all going to take, to use your words, a revolution of sorts to kind of get out of this. I think the pendulum always swings. Right now, we're far to the left or right, and we have to come back to the middle. But
mm.
you've mentioned several times already now the importance of other people and doing this
Yeah.
together. So I think that all of these relate because whatever it is, whether it's phones, whether it's drinks, whether it's food, whether it's being sedentary, like we're stuck with this stuff. We're addicted to it in some capacity. So what are the action steps, the activities that you're talking about that we can do with other people, or how do you look at the actual movement forward that you take people through?
Yeah, well, we're actively in experimentation phase. Just a little bit of context. I essentially grew up with this technology, so it was pretty ingrained in me by the time I was realizing to myself that I wanted something different. I had my first iPhone when I was 14, was on social media, at the same time, and that's pretty late, actually. I've talked to a lot of people. A lot of people, it's younger. A lot of the people who I help and who I've worked with, some of the classes that I've spoken to, these kids are 9, 10 years old when they get started. I just want to preface with that because, this is really ingrained in us, and it happened very quickly. It happened too quickly. So the things that we try are, they're pretty basic, and I think they only work when they're accessible. But we're in the early stages. We are pioneers of this problem, and so we have to be the courageous heroes of the people who figure it out from scratch. I think that so just what I teach in the community that I run. I have a school community that we're trying to turn chronic consumption into creative contribution. So again, that's giving our attention to something different rather than join this community and we're going to erase all of our bad habits. It's no, let's focus on something else, and naturally the negativity will fade into the backdrop. We focus on 4 basic systems. I envision it as a compass. So your North Star is creativity, creative work. This is not just what you're thinking. It's not just being an artist, or it's not just being a writer or a painter or a musician. It's the way I see it is it's any type of contribution from yourself and your brain. It can be solving problems, it can be coding, it can be podcasting, it can be the work that you do. It can be the work that you do. It's the giving, it's the contribution. I think that finding something that you do that you're good at and that you enjoy, that's a very, very easy replacement for this sort of consumption muscle. And ideally, it has to be fun. For a lot of people, I just started out with journaling because journaling is simple. I think people overcomplicate it. It can feel inaccessible at times. It's the simple process of observing what's going on around you and writing it down, whether that's happening inside your skull, like your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, or what's happening in the world around you. I am sitting on a train and there's a person to my right who's eating Lay's potato chips. Like it doesn't need to be profound or deep. It's a skill set of observing the world around you and writing it down, or into a voice note or something like that. So that's the creative work. Social connection is to the left or whatever, right? Depending on which way you look at it, we got to do this together. We get positive energy by being around other people. And one of the great detriments of the pandemic and digital technology and those two things together has been the isolation. It's something I've struggled with massively. It's still something that I'm grappling with, but I talk about it because I'm not alone in this. And it's been, I think, really important to open that up to the digital masses and realize that, yeah, we're kind of all going through this. We've all been alone for a long time. And this technology, the chronic consumption technology, is not helping with that. It's making it worse. Movement is also huge. I'm interested to explore that with you because it sounds like you have fitness is a big thing. It's not even just traditional fitness. I think that I personally enjoy strength training a lot. It's a big part of my life. But for a lot of people, it's just building the skill set of going out for a walk. Change made easy. I can imagine this is something that resonates. Learning to feel good and feel pleasure from moving your body, I think, is a great system to build in the smallest capacity possible so that you have an alternative. A way to reset yourself from a dopamine hole or a state of chronic consumption. And then lastly is conscious consumption. We know that we're in an information economy and information environment. We have to consume stuff that makes us feel good, that leaves us feeling inspired. We touched on this a little bit, but it's books, it's podcasts, it's audiobooks, it's music that inspires us, that gives us feeling. It's movies and TV shows, honestly, longer narrative work that we can really let our attention sink into. These things are much, much better for our brains and our spirit than, random algorithmic content. So those are the 4 systems that we talk about in Seeker Society, which is the community. Those are what I personally rely on, along with lots of other little things. But if we can really give our attention to those, I think we have a solid roadmap, a solid compass to lead us out of being lost in consumption.
How is it that you started to become so passionate about this? You're a young guy. You were inundated with this stuff. You were born in it. You were raised in it, like many others, but not many others are doing what you're doing right now. Most people are just, this is happening to them. So, what was the inflection point, or what was the thing that made you want to leave the matrix?
It's how it feels sometimes, right? I know that that's kind of a popular saying. Um, yeah, I felt the pain of it, as we all have. I would say I've been interested in taking care of myself probably more than the average person. I don't think to any great extent. It is something that's tracked throughout my life. I started exercising when I was in high school, and I liked the feeling of taking care of myself and trying to become more. I don't think everyone's wired exactly like that, but I enjoyed it, and I responded positively to speakers like Simon Sinek and other people who are traditionally recognized as self-improvement. Some people find that to be cringe or it doesn't really speak to them. I got something out of it. It resonated with me. So there's just that, there's a temperamental thing there. Like I just like it a little bit. In terms of like what made me actually start sharing, so I've always been kind of a performer. That's my background, as I come from a theater and performing background. It's something I really enjoy. That's kind of my creative work that is the first thing I knew how to do that really fueled me and I had access to. And what I struggled with in my college years, early 20s, is I didn't have an outlet for it. And so then I found myself without really any outlet for this creative passion, this desire to express myself and perform. And that obviously led to a lot of chronic consumption, because in the absence of something meaningful to do, it's very easy to turn to pleasure seeking. When you don't have a bigger, more interesting narrative in your life, obviously you're going to turn to your sensory pleasures. And I don't think that you should feel guilty for that. It's obviously something we want to change, but it's like, there's a very simple equation there. And so obviously the solution is to find something more meaningful. It became clear that the way to do that is to perform and to share my own ideas through speech and writing. And then what I found is what resonated most with people, as well as myself, was sharing ideas around these problems that I'm dealing with, that we're all dealing with. And then you can benefit from having something that's really helpful, that's functional, that solves a problem, while also being able to express yourself and tick that box within myself of wanting to perform and create an effect in people. That's a personal desire. It fills an appetite for me and also helps someone else. And I think that those two things coming together is really powerful. So I've kind of been chasing that spark since I found it end of 2022 or so.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And something I want to highlight for listeners, because this is something that I don't think people talk about enough, is it's just as you said, right? Like, it's like, yes, you've done all this stuff and what you've done has been amazing, the audience that you've built and putting yourself out there. But like you said, like you always had a bit of a natural inclination towards certain things. Like you enjoyed exercising to an extent,
Right.
right? Working out is still hard. Same thing with me, right? If everyone exists on a bell curve, most people will be in the middle, the regular, normal, average, and there will be outliers in every regard. So some people get more enjoyment. We all exist on a spectrum out of certain things. For you or I, who got fortunate that when the dice rolled, it landed on the thing I get enjoyment out of, is something that is beneficial for my physical and mental health, like reading self-help, like exercising. Someone else got the same dice roll and it got the things that they enjoy are playing video games and reading manga. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't nearly benefit them as much. And now that's where people are starting from. So I think that it's important for people like you or I that to then take that and then go a step further and then use that passion to start to bring people over that divide and start to teach and grow. And then we see that it's like, oh, there's something more than just myself, right? It's
Yeah.
more than just me. If I can teach someone how to do this stuff, that's why I have this podcast. It's just like, once I understood how to make myself
Mm.
healthy or happy or better, it's just like, well, the only next logical thing for me is to help other people do it, because why would I not?
I think you're right about the bell curve across like all traits with all humans. I just want to be clear though, like I don't think that I'm very much an outlier. Like I think I mean everyone's gonna like fall somewhere in the bell curve. I think that nurture has a lot to do with it. I think yeah, you're born a certain way and you have certain tendencies and traits. But I personally, just from my own experience, like a lot of what I care about and how I interact with the world has been a product of my parents and how I was raised and the culture of my upbringing. Like that I think is very relevant. Do you factor that into your like bell curve example?
Yeah, 100%. Right. Again, the dice
Yeah.
rolled also that I was born into an affluent white
Yeah.
family where I had the space and time to, after college, not go and get a job right away, which made me land as a personal trainer where I had a year to build clients. A lot of people start as a personal trainer and they fizzle out because it takes a while to build up a client base. So I had a lot of things going for me in the right way. But it's just, so it's something that I think about a lot, is that like, all right, okay, this whole thing is change made easy. But the reality is we only do things that are
Hmm.
easy for
Yeah.
us. Meaning, if I'm choosing to do something, someone will say, I really didn't want to work out today, but I did it anyway. It's like, well, you did want to work out because you did. And in that regard, working out was the easy thing for you, because what would have been harder would be to not work out and have to sit with the fact that you skipped a workout. our brain will only let us ever do the thing that is going to take us closer to survival. And the thing that's going to take us closer to survival is the thing that is the path of least resistance. Water always flows to the lowest point. So even when we're doing something that is to the outer world hard, getting on social media and showing up, making a post, quitting our job, becoming an entrepreneur, running an ultra marathon, that is to that person the thing that was easier than the alternative, which is not doing that thing. Even when, by all metrics, that thing is hard, theoretically, the point is that you can't compare yourself to anyone else, because when David Goggins runs a 1,000-mile race and does 10,000 pull-ups, even though it makes his muscles explode and he shits himself on the way, that was easier for him than to not do that thing. And then I can't unsee that, because that's the only way that it makes sense to me. So again, and I bring that up for listeners because it's just like, you mentioned the comparison machine, of social media. And that's so much of what this is like, oh, like Paul does like this, or Josh is like this, or whoever is like this. But it's like, you cannot compare yourself to someone because you had different genetics, different upbringing, different nature, different nurture, all of those different things. And that's why for me, I actually have a very similar framework to you. I teach, my framework is called EASIER. It's an acronym, EASIER, but E stands for enthusiasm. And that to me is the whole thing. It's like, you have to want to do the thing, because that's what's going to get you to do it. And what gets you to do it gets you to be consistent, and consistency breeds results. So you use the word fun. I'm going to use those interchangeably because I feel like we're kind of on the same path with that. My question is now, how do you get people to look at things as fun when, for most people, they think that fun is doing what they've already been doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm working on it. I still have to work on it with myself sometimes. Right off the bat, I think the community approach goes a long way. Doing it with other people. There's an accountability component there. It's not exactly fun, but it certainly can be motivating, or it can be make it easier, reduce the friction. But the thing that I go back to is like, if you scale things down deep enough, if you go deep enough within yourself and give yourself the space and the silence to be bored again, your attention is a precious thing that will direct you to something meaningful eventually. Like, there's something in the world that you find interesting. And if you just have to get to that one thing and just give yourself enough time and patience and boredom to find it, you will get there. That process in and of itself might not be fun because it's a transition away from stimulation. And any kind of change or transition is on some level uncomfortable. So there is that. But I give a lot of trust and power to human attention. I think that everyone has something. Everyone has a spark that's worth following. That sounds a little woo woo and like, bumper sticker, kitchen magnet, whatever, motivational speak, but it's true. Everyone has something that is at least a little bit interesting to them. So it's a matter of giving yourself the space to find it, which can be difficult when you have noise and stimulation and tools to hijack your attention coming at you at all times. So that's the resistance that we're up against. How do we make things fun? I think, yeah, making it easy is a big part of it. Getting people as giving them as much access as possible to the feeling of moving towards a meaningful goal, being able to identify the meaningful goal and then make incremental progress towards it. That's a pretty systems level of seeing it. But there's fulfillment that comes from that. Yeah. Does any of that resonate with you and your experience in the coaching world?
Yeah, 100%. You hit the nail on the head. It's a small incremental change over time. I use the framework of big goals and little goals. So you need the big, far out there goals that are like motivational, that drive you towards something. That's the big change. But you need the small daily action goals that will continue to fuel that fire and keep it burning. And if you only have either one of the or the other, you're going to fizzle out, because if you only have the big goal, it's too far away and you don't get that momentum going to ever actually get there. And if you only have the little goal, it just feels like drudgery and you're just going through the motions and you don't have something to actually get excited about, because no one actually gets excited about 10,000 steps. What they get excited about is what happens after making a year of 10,000 steps and what that could mean for their life. So you have to have both of those things. And a lot of other stuff that goes into it, but that's a great systems level thing, as you said. I'm curious, something I've heard you talk about on your social media. What is the difference between self improvement
Mm.
and character
Yeah.
creation?
So this is a big one for me. I grew up in self improvement culture. Like I said, it was something that spoke to me on some level. It resonated. And so when I came across videos like that, it spoke to me. But in my experience, it created kind of a toxic cycle of self improvement and self destruction where I would feel at a base level inadequate. I'm not enough. I'm not in good enough shape. I am not making enough progress towards goals. I'm not making content. I should be making content. Gary Vee is telling me I need to make content, and I'm not doing that. And so then I would make some big change. Usually, the fitness example is what it would be. So I would like exercise really hard or make all of these changes to my diet and make myself very physically uncomfortable in that change. And I would swing really hard this way, and then my willpower, which is a limited resource, would inevitably deplete, and I would, with a combination of that and all of the negative self-talk of like, you're not good enough, you're not this person, you're comparing yourself to someone up here. Obviously I go back into a state of self-soothing because that's a really uncomfortable place to be. So I would go back into self-soothing and then spiral down into sort of like cheap pleasure seeking consumption habits as a way to just numb myself from the pain I was exerting upon myself. And this cycle would happen over and over again. So then I realized eventually, like, this is not the way forward. When you look at every protagonist in all of the popular fiction that you idealize, that you turn to, that you get your sense of meaning from, they weren't living in this chronic self-improvement, self-destruction cycle. They were on some type of meaningful quest, hero's journey, whatever you want to call it, to achieve something that was bigger than them, that was more than just building a fitness habit or starting to post online or reading or 10,000 steps, whatever. And they changed as a byproduct of that experience. And so the way I see character creation is take yourself out of yourself and your own self-perceived inadequacies for a second and find something to do that is meaningful and that requires you to change as a byproduct. I don't have a lot of great examples for this because I think for a lot of people, positive habits like exercise and writing and reading and posting or whatever it is for them, taking their work seriously, going to school, that represents a really meaningful journey. But it's kind of like just changing the North Star. If you change the North Star from I want to become better to I want to like achieve this thing, or I have a journey towards something else, my attention again is going towards something that's bigger than me and my own inadequacies, you're more likely to enjoy that journey even when it's difficult. Inevitably, when you face the discomfort of the change, you're more likely to be naturally motivated to stick with it. And then lastly, visually, like, the way I see character creation is it allows for the mistakes. It allows for the stumbling and the falling and the dopamine holes because that makes you a richer, more textured character in the narrative that is your life. You can look at self-improvement as like just a standard, line chart. It's like linear up and to the right. Over and there's peaks and valleys. We've all seen those visuals. You make a little progress, you flatline, you go down, you go back up, you like this. But slowly, gradually, you're headed up and to the right in that linear direction. And that's fine. That can be an easy way to visualize goal setting, little goals and big goals. You take the little steps. What I prefer to visualize it as in terms of character creation is a series of retreating circles where it's not like linear up and to the right where it's, you're across time, you make more progress. You're just becoming a more complete individual. And this includes all of your flaws and your vulnerabilities and the insecurities and the parts of yourself that turn to chronic consumption and accepting that as part of your character. You're living in a narrative that is bigger than you. And if you want to be the protagonist of your life, you have to accept that you've got these fatal flaws. You have an Achilles heel. You might have several. And that makes you a more interesting character. When you accept that and it's part of your character, you can engage with the quest without having to be perfect, without having to swing all the way back into self-destruction after your very fragile streak broke on day 99. And that was a much more helpful way of visualizing it. And I still struggle with it. I still have to consistently reorient myself back to that. Life is the best for me when it feels like my daily actions are significant, when they feel like they are part of a greater narrative. And sometimes that has to include the imperfections and the things that are not in line with your highest self or whatever. That's something we also have to discard. I know I'm a little bit all over the place, but I think that becoming more complete, becoming more whole, becoming more accepting of all the parts of yourself, and at least being aware of them is more. It's probably more sustainable than constantly trying to go up and to the right forever, perpetual improvement into infinity. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Honestly, this is something that I mean, not only teach people, but in my own life has been extremely impactful for me. Is anytime I'm going through character development, as you said. Like it's not good, it's not bad, it's just character development. I just remind myself like, oh, this is that. This was that time. There was never a time where this wasn't going to be a thing.
Yeah, yeah,
I say to people all the time, it's like, how arrogant could you be to think that you get to be the everything works out for me person? No one wants to hear that story. No one wants the story of the protagonist who just like, yep, everything went good for them and they lived happily ever after. Like no one's watching that movie, no one's buying that book. And yet in our own lives, we go, well, I know that it never happens for anyone else. And I know that I wouldn't like to read a story about it, but I would like it to happen to me right now. And it's just like, it's so nonsensical to even think that that would
yeah,
happen. So, not that it makes it go away when I'm going through something, but it's just like, this is the ebb before the flow. This is the yin to the yang. This is the tide going in before it goes out, whatever analogy you prefer. It's all a part of that. But I think that a lot of that is becomes easier when you have that, as you said, North Star
mm,
of where am I actually going? And I think so many people don't have that. And that comes back to something we kind of touched on in the beginning, which is knowledge of self.
mm,
So if you are going to be the protagonist, the hero of your own journey, how do you know? How do you start to know if you're talking to someone, if you're working with someone, if you're just meet someone in a coffee shop and they say, hey, Josh, I've heard you talk about this stuff. Like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't
yeah.
know where this story ends. How do I start to get on that path?
Yeah, well, that's a big one. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are pretty deep in this problem, and if you've been in a dopamine hole for a long time, you're not going to go from that to like, okay, I know my life purpose, and I'm now going to start taking relentless action on it. That's not an overnight process, obviously. The thing that I like to remind myself is that the protagonist in whatever popular fiction you're thinking of had no idea either. Bilbo and Frodo were just living their lives when the journey found them. All of this to say that you can kind of relinquish control of that part of it. I recommend identifying with the heroic significance of the daily actions you already have to do, understanding that that is part of your story. And by engaging with them meaningfully, by giving your full attention to them, you take ownership of them. They are your narrative. There's a narrative significance to doing the laundry as long as you give your attention to that, because you're not just the protagonist of your life, you are the in the front row of the audience, you are witnessing it, so you get to enjoy it, and you get to give your attention to it. So just, it's a fancy way of saying, like, start with what's in front of you. You don't have to have everything figured out. You do not need to outsource your North Star, your life mission. You don't have to arbitrarily put your finger on the map and say, this is it, X marks the spot. It'll probably find you after starting to take action on some things. So the basic systems approach, again, like, you start with the thing that you can do. You scale the task back to what's accessible, whether it's sitting up 25%, 50%, standing up, making your bed, doing your laundry, cooking a meal for yourself, a couple eggs, going outside for a walk, walking the dog, sending a text to a loved one. These are all things that should be fairly accessible to you in the beginning, and that you can see as the heroic steps of your journey in the beginning. And if you frame it that way, your brain will respond to that, and you'll feel a sense of like dopaminergic heroism by engaging with them. If you repeat that process over a long enough time horizon while slowly scaling up the tasks, writing for a little bit longer, going out to a bookstore and accepting the adventure of finding a new book and kind of just trusting the universe to point you in the right way, there's a fair amount of like spiritualistic release that comes with this. Like, that's where some of the woo woo magic comes from. You have to let that in. You can't try to just control and architect your life in surgically. It doesn't. I personally don't find it to be effective. But you just scale up the tasks, and then eventually the quest kind of presents itself to you. If you can make enough space in your own attention, and again retreat back into silence, your own intuition is a very powerful force that can point you in the right direction. So you start with what's in front of you, and you accept that whether you're in a dopamine hole or you're making rapid progress, either situation, you're the protagonist of your life, and you're in control. So yeah, you don't have to have everything figured out. You just start with what's right in front of you. It's pretty common advice these days, but if you give it heroic significance, treat it as the story, you'll enjoy it, and you'll be naturally motivated to start.
Yeah, well, common advice, cliche advice is usually cliche for a reason. And it's the stuff that we hear over and over and over that usually we have to actually take in because there's a reason that someone has told you that 1,000 times or you've heard that on 1,000 podcasts. So sometimes it's this time that someone needed to hear it for it to click. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I really love the idea, like you just said, of, Frodo and Bilbo didn't know that they were about to set off on their hero's journey when it happens. So just always coming to things with a sense of openness and awe and wonderment can be really powerful, because you never know when it's your journey, and when you're going to look back on this as a time of like, oh, that was the thing that really gave me that character development. That was the thing that I really needed. So, Josh, this is, I know that you have a big dream. So my question is, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
Yeah, it's a great one. Well, I guess it might be helpful to start with how I'm trying to be the change, right? That's the expression, be the change you wish to see in the world. I'm really trying to take control of my attention and devote it to what I care about, and devote it into creative work, devote it to meaningful lifestyle practices, and enjoy it. It's the most precious cognitive resource we have. And in a world that's clamoring to take every second of it, whether those are positive or negative sources, your ownership of that attention is a really, really powerful thing. So that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. And I guess in doing that, what I'm trying to help other people do. I see that over the next several decades, the attempts to control your attention and take you away from yourself in the present moment, those are only going to increase. They're going to become much more immersive and addictive and powerful. And so I guess what I'm hoping to do is help contribute to a culture, a digital culture of meaningful living. And all the systems we talked about today, the approaches, the philosophies, all of that informs that. But I believe in the power of humans. I know that's really idealistic and up there, but I do. And I think that we are pioneers, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure out how we can control our minds and our time and do it together and not be imprisoned by an algorithm. Yeah, I think that's where we start.
And I think so too. And I believe in you. So if you had one action step that listeners can take right now, today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out, to start making the change that they're trying to make easier, what would it be?
Mm, yeah, I think it's like it's it's a anything you can do to get back to yourself for a second. I know that that's not always super tangible. Headphones out. I would sit in silence for 60 seconds. I would breathe for 60 seconds. I would accept and really ingrain in your body, in your veins, that you can trust yourself. Like, if you get back to a sense of your own intuition, your body will guide you. You are the leader that you need. And it's all of the external voices and distractions that get in the way of that internal voice. By reconnecting with it, by opening up the conversation again, you'll be guided to what you need to do. And then probably what it is from there are the things that are right in front of you. How can you live meaningfully in this moment? Make the most of the space that's around you, literally the physical space. What can you do to make your body feel good in this moment? And really take the next steps that maybe you know how to do from a place of joy and self-appreciation. Like, discipline and training your body to handle stress is very important. This is what we have to do to be resilient, both psychologically and physically. But what does it look like to like truly take care of yourself right now? I think it's returning back to silence for a second. In that moment, trying to reconnect to the intuition. It's not now, then in the near future. And then moving slowly and gently through the next actions, like making your bed, folding your laundry, sending a text to someone you love. I've said them 1,000 times, but they really are powerful, those little tiny things. And then maybe as a more tangible thing, I would write. If you wanted to immediately connect to something creative, I would just write, and I would let practice the skill set of letting the voice rip through you, seeing yourself as a channel for it. You don't need to mastermind anything incredible. You just have to use your attention and train it. Train it to look within yourself and the feelings that you're going through, and like recounting your day and all of the things that you can observe within yourself as well as the outer world. And if you can practice that, you immediately have a vehicle out of consumption and give your attention to something else. I know that was a kind of a bit of a laundry list there, but if it's return to silence, live meaningfully in the physical environment you're in, and then put your thoughts on paper or into a voice note, I think that would be a really solid 3-step protocol to feel your intuition and then channel it into something.
If you're really passionate about making this change stick, then I just have to remind you about my free weekly newsletter. Don't miss out on joining the thousands of change seekers just like you who get a curated list each week of 5 educational, informative, and inspiring pieces of content that will help you on your quest for change. Go to the notes of whatever app you're listening on and click the link that says free newsletter now. And you'll be signed up to get free tips sent straight to your inbox every Friday that will help make your change journey easier. All you have to do is click free newsletter right now. Go to that link, and I'll see you back here every Tuesday and Thursday for new episodes of Change Made Easy.